Johnnie Taylor, R&B legend and a giant of the disco era, dies unexpectedly of a heart attack in a Dallas hospital at the age of 66.
Johnnie Taylor died without a will, and as such, there was no way for him to designate who would administer his estate at his death.
In the wake of Taylor's death, secrets that he'd kept for over 40 years erupt.
When this man ups and passes away, all of a sudden you want to come forth and say, this is my father?
Old relationships are shattered.
For him to do that just really shocked my world.
And new evidence may turn long-held assumptions upside down.
I just knew it was going to be opening Pandora's box.
On May 31st, 2000, acclaimed singer Johnnie Taylor dies of a heart attack in Dallas, leaving an estate valued at $1.3 million. Born in Arkansas in 1937, Johnnie Taylor began performing in gospel groups as a teenager. His voice was so striking it caught the ear of the great Sam Cooke, and in 1957, Taylor was recruited as lead singer of the famed Soul Stirrers. His eldest son, Anthony, understands that as a black musician in that era, his father's path to stardom wasn't easy.
The struggles that they had to deal with in the music business in the mid to late 50s was a tremendous strain on those entertainers, and what they had to endure made him a really special individual.
In the early 1960s, Taylor vaulted onto the R&B charts, recording more than a dozen hits over the course of the decade, and even outselling the celebrated Otis Redding. His second son, Floyd, recalls his father's mesmerizing performances.
When I first saw my dad perform, I watched every move he made on stage. I watched and listened to every phrase he made, all of it.
But it was his 1976 smash hit Disco Lady that launched him to pop stardom. The song became the first single in history to go platinum, establishing itself as an anthem of the freewheeling disco era. Much like other entertainers of the time, Johnnie Taylor immersed himself in the hedonistic world of the 1970s. Taylor had battled a serious addiction to cocaine and alcohol for years. In the 1980s, he went public with his problem to promote awareness about addiction and to support Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign. But according to his children, he wasn't able to say no forever.
Well, my dad had a bad heart too, okay? So I think the drugs, the late nights, the partying had a big old effect on him, you know, because, I mean, there are nights that my dad would stay up for days, you know, and there are times that I'd be like, Dad, why don't you get you some rest?
I believe his addictions evolved in the late 60s and 70s. There was one kind of addiction. In the 90s, there was another type of an addiction.
I once told my dad, I said, Dad, you gonna smoke up at the house and the dog? He said, well, it's my house and my dog.
But I believe at various stages he got a handle on that problem. But I believe that over the years there was just a lot of wear and tear on the body, mentally as well as physically.
To me, it didn't affect his behavior that I could see. He was always the cool, charismatic cat that he was, you know. I wouldn't say that it affected him in any kind of way. Maybe it did, and I just couldn't see it, you know. And that's probably one of the things that probably took my father away from me, you know. So if it was, you know, I'm very hurt that's what took him away from me, you know, because I was just beginning to know my father at the time.
Along with the drugs came the sex. His enormous charisma and talent made him a magnet for women. And he acknowledged that from the 1950s through to the 1970s, he fathered 6 children with 4 different women.
It was what the women were like around my dad. And they would go to almost any length to be around, share themselves with my father. He didn't have to do very much at all just be there, and there the women were. And I saw this all my life. That's one of the characteristics we shared in common as a youngster, and so those were some of the things that he talked to me about, father-son wise, to the pitfalls of life. But it was him. He had his whole life was surrounded around women, and there was no change in that.
First, there was Anthony Arnold, born in Kansas City in 1953 to Taylor's high school sweetheart, Ruby May. Next came Floyd, born in Chicago in 1954 to Mildred Singletary. Third and fourth were Johnnie Jr. and Sabrina, born in 1957 and 1959. Taylor had married their mother, Harriet, in 1956. And finally, in 1972 and 73, Jonathan and Latasha were born to Taylor's second wife, Jerlene.
He was a heck of a ladies' man. When I was growing up, my dad was just getting his music career. He was just getting into the music industry. And I didn't see him that much. I didn't get a chance to know my dad until I was like 12 years old, you know. And by him trying to get out here in the music world, it took him away from me quite a bit. So when I did get a chance to meet my father, I was very happy to know who he was, you know. Like I say, he was always gone, you know, trying to make a name for himself out here in the world. And now that I have children, now I understand him a lot more.
Taylor's children grew up scattered across the country, yet Taylor made sure to foster a strong family bond between the siblings.
If you was my father's child, he made sure that his children knew each other.
The unexpected nature of Johnnie Taylor's death left his children reeling with shock.
The only thing that I could do was find me a corner and sit down and just try to grasp hold of all of this here, you know. He was one heck of a man. He was a good guy to be around. He was gonna tell you the truth. He was not gonna cut no corners with you. And like I say, one thing about my dad is, and I'm glad he did it, he didn't spoil us, man, especially not his boys. He made you be men. And when I say made you be men, he made sure that we was gonna stand up on our own 2 feet. That's one thing I miss about him.
Strangely, Johnnie Taylor may have had a premonition about his demise. His last single, Soul Heaven, was about joining soul greats in the afterlife. His eldest son, Anthony, recalls his father's hesitation with recording the song.
And he said, "Son, they want me to sing this song, and I don't want to sing it." And I truly believe that he had a premonition about this song. I believe that he knew within his own heart that he was close.
His funeral turns into a massive celebration of his life and work, with thousands of fans in attendance, including celebrities like Aretha Franklin, Bobby Womack, and Al Green. His sons Anthony and Floyd are overwhelmed by the procession.
It was almost like being at a concert. There were quite a few entertainers there. And we had to feel like we were in Hollywood going up the red carpet.
My concern was, I'm not gonna see my father anymore. That was my main concern. That was it. So when they closed the lid on him, I couldn't take it, you know. I just knew I wasn't gonna see him again.
Having buried their father, his children turned to the question of inheritance and quickly discovered that Taylor did not leave a will. According to probate law, this means that Taylor's estate will be split evenly between all 6 of his children. Most of what they stand to inherit will come from the sale of Taylor's Dallas mansion, a house valued at over $1 million. Together with several other properties, the estate adds up to approximately $1.3 million. This means that Taylor's children can expect to inherit over $200,000 each. But in August of 2000, before the estate can be settled, they receive shocking news. A woman from North Carolina named Fonda Bryant files a petition with the Dallas Probate Court, claiming to be Johnnie Taylor's unacknowledged love child.
My mom was telling me from the time I could talk, she told me who my father was. And she said, it's time for you to be declared an heir.
But Fonda won't be the only surprise in store for the Taylor family.
He only claimed us. So when it came out of the woodworks that he had more children, it was like, whoa, okay.
Shortly after Johnnie Taylor dies in Texas, in faraway North Carolina, a woman named Fonda Bryant receives a phone call that will change her life.
I got home from work, and my mom called, and she was kind of somber. And she's like, I have something to tell you. Your father passed away.
Peggy hasn't seen Johnnie Taylor in over 40 years.
She's a lovely girl. He missed something by not knowing her.
When he dies, she seizes the moment to have her daughter Fonda seek what is rightfully hers.
From the time I could talk, she told me who my father was. And she said, it's time for you to be declared an heir.
He never did anything for you when you were living, but maybe now you can get some funds and it'll sort of help you have closure.
He was like 21 when he met my mother. So yeah, I give him a little bit of degree of being young and dumb, but you still should be responsible. Having sex and not protecting yourself. And even back then, you knew the consequences of having sex with somebody, you could get them pregnant. Therefore, you should man up and take responsibilities for your actions. He took no responsibility whatsoever.
But how did Fonda's mother know the famed philosopher of soul? When she was just 14, Peggy met Johnnie Taylor at a gospel show in Gastonia. At the time, he had recently joined the Soul Stirrers.
He came to town. I was around 14. He was a charmer. He was handsome and fascinating. And we struck up a conversation, and I was fascinated by him. He had traveled and been places, and I loved to hear him tell the stories about the places he had been. Once, I was sitting under the tree, a mimosa tree, and he had his head in my lap, and he sang I Love You, Porgy, to me from Porgy and Bess. But he was very kind up until the time I told him I was pregnant. And then things changed. His whole personality did a 360, and he went away. I didn't see him again for about 2 years. And I remember he said, but it only happened once. I said, don't you know that once is all it takes? I remember that.
I think he wasn't around because he was just selfish. He was a nice-looking man. His career had started taking off, and that was the most important thing to him. So therefore, he didn't care about anybody but Johnnie Taylor.
The death of a father she never really knew brings up painful memories for Fonda from when she was 14.
I had picked up a copy of Jet magazine, was flipping through it, and saw Sabrina and my father at her Sweet 16 coming out, where she had on this beautiful white dress and showed all my relatives that I did not know. And I just got enraged. Here I was in Gastonia, North Carolina, working and going to school, and he was lavishing his daughter with all these gifts and parties and stuff, and could care less where I was, what was going on with me. I wrote him a letter to his record label, which at the time was Columbia Records. I wrote it, and I got the address from the back of the record album, and wrote him the letter. Never heard anything.
14 years later, Fonda makes contact with her father.
When we talked on the phone for the first time, I was 28 years old, and he said on the phone he knew I was his daughter. And I asked him, I said, then why didn't you come around or try to see me? And he said he knew my mom had remarried and he didn't want to interfere. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And that was just an excuse that he was giving, trying to, I guess, ease his conscience or make himself feel better. I just don't think people really realize, from entertainers to people from everyday walks of life, that when you go out here and you have unprotected sex and you have these children and you don't take care of them, you don't realize the damage that you cause. I grew up always wanted to know who my father was. I even named my son Wesley's middle name is my father's last name because I still had that longing to know my father.
Knowing how difficult it has been for her daughter to grow up without Taylor in her life, Peggy presses her case.
I just knew it was going to be opening Pandora's box. I just did not want to get involved with that. But she insisted, and I said, okay, so I'll see how it goes.
Overcoming her fears, Fonda decides to contact a Dallas estate lawyer named Mark McCraw.
Well, Fonda called, and she and her mother both told a very compelling story about her need to be legally determined the child of Johnnie Taylor. We believed in her story and felt for her. That's why we took her case.
In August of 2000, Mark McCraw files a petition on Fonda's behalf. Fonda demands that she be recognized as an heir to Johnnie Taylor's estate. The news floors the Taylor family.
He only claimed us. So when it came out of the woodworks that he had more children, it was like, whoa, okay.
Her arrival ignites a media firestorm. With Taylor's 6 acknowledged children aligned against her, Fonda's battle for recognition has just begun.
It was very passionate from the very beginning, and from my client's perspective at that time, people were looking at her as an outsider. They were asking, why is she even here?
At the subsequent hearing in the fall of 2000, Fonda notices a stranger in the courtroom. To her astonishment, she discovers she is not alone in her struggle.
I didn't even know who he was. He just kept staring at us, and I was like, who is that?
A man named Tyrone T.J. Hooker appears in court and testifies that he, too, is a rightful heir to the Taylor estate.
I knew Johnnie Taylor my whole entire life. Everyone knew that was my dad here in Kansas City.
Fonda learns that TJ is no stranger to the Taylor clan. Johnnie Taylor nurtured TJ's budding musical talent at a young age and introduced him to family members. Johnnie Taylor's third son, Johnnie Taylor Jr., recalls meeting TJ.
I knew TJ for coming here to Kansas City, Missouri, visiting my father's mother. So I knew of him, but my dad never said that he was actually my brother.
My mother, she met my dad at my grandfather's church. Isaac Hooker used to be the pastor. And at this time, my dad, he was a struggling singer in the gospel field, and he was performing through the children's circuit. And he had happened to come to my grandfather's church because he used to hire all the acts, that would come to town and stuff. So, and my mother sang in the choir. And her and him, that's how he met her.
Now, I've heard that my dad would let him perform sometime, let him open up his shows, but my dad never told me one time he was my brother.
When they meet at the courthouse, an instant bond forms between Fonda and TJ.
He seemed very genuine and very sweet. When I looked at TJ, I saw my father's eyes. So that's how I kind of figured TJ was kin to me.
I really appreciate Fonda.
He didn't have an attorney himself, so he asked me would I be okay with Mark representing him, and I told him sure. And at the time, I didn't know about Chiffon, though.
Shortly after Fonda and TJ join forces, still another revelation throws the proceedings into disarray. A woman named Chiffon Brown comes forward with the claim that she is yet another of Johnnie Taylor's secret children. Although Johnnie Taylor never publicly acknowledged her as his daughter, his name is on her birth certificate. But Chiffon never met him. All she knew was that her father was the man on the record covers that her mother showed her as a child.
Chiffon has his eyes and around her forehead. She favors them too. So I could look at them and tell that they were my brother and sister.
Fonda Bryant developed a relationship with both of those persons. They were all thankful to really to find a brother or sister that they had never had before.
Staggered by these new developments, Taylor's 6 acknowledged children regroup. They now have not only 1, but 3 new people laying claim to their inheritance.
My dad may have had some dealings with their mothers. I don't know, I wasn't there, okay? But then when this man ups and passes away, all of a sudden you want to come forth and say, this is my father? don't buy that. Not one bit.
I had a bond with Floyd, Johnnie, and Sabrina, and the others, I just didn't know of them.
And my dad made sure that his children knew each other. So why would he keep y'all such a big secret?
Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon decide to band together in their struggle to win recognition as Johnnie Taylor's legal heirs. Fonda Bryant was born in North Carolina in 1961. Tyrone T.J. Hooker was born in Kansas City in 1963. That same year, Chiffon Brown was born in Louisiana. Their mothers all claim that Johnnie Taylor was the father. Mark McCraw is convinced that the two new claimants are telling the truth about their extraordinary parentage. He agrees to represent TJ and Chiffon, as well as Fonda. The question is, can they prove that they truly are the secret children of the philosopher of soul?
Each person told a compelling story. Each person's story was believable, but we needed concrete evidence to prove our case. We didn't have any witnesses that could come forth and say, yes, I know that 30 years ago or 20 years ago that Johnnie Taylor was the father of any particular child.
Although the case is challenging, the outlines are clear. It's a legal struggle between his clients Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon versus Taylor's 6 acknowledged children. But as McCraw begins his research, he discovers that there is yet another player vying for a share of Johnnie Taylor's estate.
Shortly prior to his death, Johnnie Taylor had gotten a divorce, and that caused another complication in this matter.
Johnnie Taylor had married his second wife, Jerlene Taylor, in 1970, and it was Jerlene who gave birth to Taylor's 2 youngest children, Latasha and Jonathan. 26 years after their wedding, Johnnie and Jerlene bitterly split in 1996. The separation was intensely hostile, and it would take another 4 years of legal wrangling to finalize their divorce in the spring of 2000. 1 month later, Taylor was dead.
I saw a copy of the divorce decree. Mark sent us a copy. I have never seen a divorce that bad. My father must have really been wanting to get rid of her because he gave her anything that she wanted.
In the divorce decree, Jerlene won 50% of most of Johnnie's estate. That means that before Taylor's heirs can inherit the estate, it will be cut in half. Jerlene has done well for herself, but there's a hitch. By far the largest asset in Johnnie Taylor's estate is his $1.2 million house. So for Jerlene to get her 50% of the estate, the house must be sold. But this can't happen until the estate has been settled, which in turn depends on the results of Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon's DNA tests. Jerlene joins forces with Taylor's eldest daughter, Sabrina, to try to gain control of the estate before it's too late.
She was trying to do everything to get her share and her children's share, and she could care less about the rest of the heirs. And that's something the other heirs should have seen, even the ones that I didn't get along with. They should have seen that Jerlene was only interested in Jerlene and her children.
Jerlene and Sabrina insist that since Johnnie Taylor never publicly acknowledged Fonda, TJ, or Chiffon, they have no right to his estate.
For some reason, I think that Sabrina, she never has liked me and she never has acknowledged me as a part of the Taylor family. I don't know why, but, you know, she just won't. You know, and to this day, she still badmouths me.
TJ's relationship to the Taylor family has been complicated and uncertain from the start. Unlike his other siblings, Anthony Arnold has had a long-standing relationship with TJ. When Anthony was 22 and TJ was 12, they became friends after TJ's mother introduced Anthony as his father's son.
And I met him through his mother, and who I was quite fond of, his mom. I just sort of accepted him at that point.
Over the years, they developed a close bond, but the rest of Taylor's children will remain skeptical of TJ.
They weren't around him because they lived in Chicago, and the communication lines were open between myself and my siblings, but not with TJ. They just did not warm up to him.
Sabrina will meet TJ for the first time in 1967. She immediately rejects him as a member of her family.
At my grandmother's funeral, we all came together because she had passed away. And we were on the porch, and a young lady said, "Sabrina, there goes your brother." And she said, "That's not my brother."
Because Johnnie Taylor never officially recognizes TJ as his son, TJ's identity remains in limbo. He is known to the family, but they see him as an outsider. And Sabrina's initial hostility towards TJ will not change over the years. Only Anthony will maintain a friendship with TJ.
Well, when Dad died, and we all showed up at the hotel where everyone was staying, when we knocked on the door and she opened up the door, the first thing she said was, "Why did you bring him?" I still don't understand that to this day.
You know, I got scolded by my family members for why did I bring him? But I felt it was the right thing to do.
From that moment on, TJ knows that the only way he will ever be publicly accepted as Johnnie Taylor's son is to fight for recognition in court. But legal procedures take time, and as the fight goes on between the acknowledged and unacknowledged siblings, Sabrina and Jerlene realize that the estate is steadily melting away. When Johnnie Taylor died, he was deeply in debt. In fact, he owed the IRS a staggering $100,000 in back taxes. With every delay in the disposition of the $1.3 million estate, fines, interest, and legal fees are tacked on, compounding the already massive debt. Jerlene and Sabrina petition the court to be appointed administrator of the estate and sell Taylor's $1 million Dallas mansion before the debt eats away their inheritance. But Fonda deeply distrusts Jerlene's motives.
I fussed at Mark because I told him, I said, "Mark, she has no interest in making sure that everybody is going to be treated fairly. All she cares about is herself and her 2 children. She could care less if any of the rest of us end up with anything."
Mark McCraw successfully files a petition to block Jerlene and Sabrina from becoming administrator of the estate. Instead, Dallas probate court judge Nikki DeShazo appoints attorney Linda Weiland as a neutral party to act on behalf of the estate.
Johnnie Taylor died without a will, and as such, there was no way for him to designate who would administer his estate at his death. His ex-wife and his daughter had each filed motions and requests to be appointed administrator of his estate, but came to no agreement as to who would serve. So the judge decided to appoint me as an independent person completely unrelated to the case to serve as administrator.
The judge orders that nothing be done to the estate until Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon have won or lost their bid to be declared Taylor's heirs. Johnnie's house cannot be put up for sale. To aid his case, attorney Mark McCraw turns to a still unusual form of legal evidence: siblingship DNA testing.
Back at that time period, this particular way of proving DNA was much more difficult.
The best way to test paternity is to take samples of DNA from the alleged father and compare them to his possible children. But since Johnnie Taylor is dead, McCraw asked that a sibling study be conducted instead.
So you'd take a known child and compare that with a person who may be a child or maybe they're not a child.
If the sibling study doesn't work, McCraw suggests that as a last-ditch scenario, Johnnie Taylor's corpse be dug up so that a DNA sample can be taken from him directly. And the prospect of exhuming Taylor will not be the only controversy triggered by a DNA test. When the results come in, they will raise a staggering possibility.
I'm like, what does that mean, Mark? Is she not my sister? Is she not his daughter? What's going on?
The DNA sibling study that Mark McCraw has proposed in the fall of 2000 is not as well known as straightforward paternity testing, and there are doubts that it will work. The alternative is to dig up Taylor's grave and exhume his corpse.
When I first heard of someone even mention the fact that they wanted to come to Kansas City and exhume my father's body, I said I would fight it tooth and nail.
To prevent the exhumation of her father's corpse, Johnnie Taylor's eldest daughter, Sabrina, agrees to provide a sample of her DNA. The DNA expert that Mark McCraw hires to conduct the test promises that in a few months' time, he will be able to provide test results. Anticipating a conclusive answer, Judge DeShazo sets a hearing date for December 20th, 2000. But the judge's optimism will not be rewarded. The DNA testing takes far longer than expected, and with every delay, bills continue to pile up.
Every time we went back to a court hearing, the first item on the docket was the fees to be extracted from the estate for attorneys. And that was very much an irritant to me.
Anthony's anger is shared by his younger brother, Floyd. Floyd makes the decision to confront Fonda personally in an effort to establish some kind of relationship with her.
I was out on a promotional tour, and it just happened to be in a town where she lived and at a radio station that I was doing a promotional thing with.
And I worked for the radio station, the front door, at a club in Charlotte on Thursday nights. So I get to the club and he comes in and performs. He came over to me and started bothering me and said, we need to go outside and talk. And I told him, I said, I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not going anywhere with you, and this is not the place to talk.
So I walked over to her and asked, I said, hey, can we talk? She says, I'm working. I said, well, I can handle that. So I goes over and I talk to her boss, and he say, hey, that's no problem. Yeah, you can talk to her.
And he just kept, trying to get me to go outside, and I told him no, and he just kept getting madder and madder.
Meanwhile, something tells me to turn around, and I can see her waving her hands like this here. No. What do you have to hide? What do you have to hide? If you are my sister, then you need to step up to the plate.
I could tell from his demeanor, it wouldn't be a good idea to go outside. You don't know how people will react or what they might do. So I was not putting myself maybe in harm's way.
If she walked in this room right now, I would get up out of this chair and walk right out. Because I reached out to you. And for you to throw my reach out back into my face like that, I'm gonna be bothered with you.
And as the bad blood between the two sides increases, the results of the DNA test continue to be delayed. A frustrated Jerlene demands that the DNA evidence be excluded from the proceeding. She insists that the estate be released so that she can sell Taylor's mansion and pay the massive debt that is piling higher every day. Linda Weiland, the third-party administrator, is sympathetic.
There were not enough liquid assets in the estate to pay all the creditors, so it was necessary to sell property.
And when Johnnie Taylor's house sells, it's his ex-wife, Jerlene, who will be the real estate agent.
I was really upset because not only was she gonna get 50% now of the house that we sold, she was still living there on top of that.
Jerlene Taylor was a licensed realtor, and the divorce decree gave her the authority to be that listing realtor for the sale of the property.
I was livid because people were coming by, supposedly interested in the house. How did we know what they were offering with her staying there?
Mark McCraw petitions Judge DeShazo to block the sale of the house until the DNA test results are in. And because of the delay, he asks for a continuance of the trial. Judge DeShazo agrees. Nothing can be done with the estate until the court decides whether or not Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon are truly Johnnie Taylor's children.
Waiting on the DNA results, I was very comfortable because I knew who my father was.
The way that they were fighting me and saying bad things about me and everything, I started to get some doubts.
Finally, in January of 2001, 4 months after the DNA samples were first taken, the results are available. But there's a huge problem.
For some reason, we weren't able to get a good test result from them.
The laboratory that conducted the test detected what it called a mutation in the DNA of one of the samples. but they refuse to say to whom the sample belonged. They ask for new samples to be taken, but explicitly do not ask for another sample from Sabrina.
If her DNA is not matching my DNA and we have different mothers, but we have the same father, that left me thinking, well, maybe, hey, is she really his daughter?
How would she know? She wasn't never there. How would she know?
Oh, I know Sabrina's my sister, and she's Johnnie Taylor's daughter. I know that.
No question at all. We never even considered those that grew up together.
One of Taylor's best-known singles includes the lyrics, "Who's making love to your old lady while you were out making love?" Was Taylor singing about his own life when he recorded this?
Who's making love to your old lady while you're out making love? Oh my.
When Sabrina was not asked to give a resample, it's really unclear what that means.
When a mutation is detected in a sample, it means that at least one part of the DNA is different from the sample that it's being tested against. Experts call the test inconclusive. It means that paternity has neither been proven nor disproven.
Is this some truth in it? The DNA is DNA, and I'm gonna leave that alone.
It was a very confusing, because here you thought automatically those DNA were gonna come back matching. And when they didn't, it just left more doubt, more confusion, and more heartache.
There will be yet another interminable delay before the estate battle can be resolved.
With the first DNA test, I was upset, I was confused, and then I thought, okay, are we gonna throw in the towel, Mark? What are we gonna do?
I think the court should have went on and exhumed my father's body and pinched a little of his skin off or whatever they do and did it that way. Because, I mean, that's the main horse right there.
The probate court in Dallas ruled out the option of exhuming the body because the body was buried in a different state.
New samples must now be taken from Jerlene's children, Latasha and Jonathan, and compared to the DNA of Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon. The estate battle has already dragged on for nearly a year when Judge DeShazo sets a new date for a hearing with no idea of the consequences of her decision.
September 11th, I will never forget it.
Then the shocking news of a terrorist attack arrives in Dallas.
Me and Anthony was together, and I got a call. And one of my girlfriends at the time said, "Do you have your TV on?" And I said, "No, what's wrong?" She said, "I can't explain it, you need to cut your TV on."
We were outside the courtroom, and we were called in one by one to testify.
And the bailiff came in and said something.
I remember hearing something about a plane having some type of problem.
I'm like, what is happening? And I had just got off a plane too, man. I'm like, oh my God. That will always stick in my heart because me and my brother were together that day. And I think that will keep me and him together always.
They were standing around, and everybody was standing around, and they locked the doors.
Every federal building was under heavy guard. The security was very tight. Security people running around everywhere with rifles and pistols almost in the ready position.
Nobody understood what was happening.
I'm like, man, this can't be happening. It can't be happening. In the United States?
Amid the panic that quickly sweeps the nation, Judge DeShazo has to make a choice. Either go ahead despite the uncertainty of national security or postpone an already painstakingly scheduled hearing.
Right after that, we were called into the courtroom, and the judge said, well, in lieu of what has happened in New York, we may not be able to have the hearing today. I said, oh my goodness. Oh my, please have it, please have it.
Because persons had come in from out of state, that we had scheduled it for that particular day, the court decided to push through to conclude the hearing.
Then she conferred with some people, and they decided to go ahead.
So they locked us inside of the courtroom and continued to have court.
And for TJ, what happened next would irrevocably change the way he looked at the world. Anthony Arnold, Johnnie Taylor's eldest acknowledged child, takes the stand, and his testimony shocks TJ.
He said that Johnnie Taylor never told him that I was his son. He put his hand on the Bible. So I was shocked, and to be honest with you, that's the only thing that really hurt me out of this whole trial.
I gave the court the answer that I felt was proper. I wasn't there. I have no way of knowing. Did my father accept or reject him?
I was about to fall out because I had rolled down there with him, 8 hours in the car.
He thought that I should have just stood up and unequivocally announced him as my father's child. Maybe I should have, I don't know, but...
And then he gets to trial and gets with these people, and now he don't know me.
I'd say he was bitter.
Anthony was my brother. He was the link to the Taylors to me, and he was the only one that I felt comfortable being around. And for him to do that just really shocked my world.
We barely acknowledged one another in the courtroom. Did I hear him call him son, as he did others? No.
Well, Johnnie Taylor never told me that you was his son either.
But Anthony Arnold doesn't have to prove anything, nor do any of Johnnie Taylor's acknowledged children. As for the mysterious results of Sabrina's DNA test,
it was never brought up in court. Mark never brought it up because by law, even if you're born of the marriage but you're not that person's child, you're still considered that person's child by law. So either way, she still is an heir, even though she might not be his daughter.
But for Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon, the only way to be declared heirs to Johnnie Taylor's estate is to present conclusive DNA evidence. This turns out to be more difficult than Mark McCraw's clients expected. To Fonda's dismay, Judge DeShazo decides not to read the DNA evidence in court.
And I'm like, you could end it right now by opening this envelope and saying, hey, here's the results of the DNA test. But I kind of think that she didn't want to open it because all of us were in there.
Instead, apparently feeling that the timing is not right for the revelations contained in the envelope, Judge DeShazo brings the hearing to a close and announces that the ruling will be sent by mail.
I don't know if it was because September 11th, it was because what had happened, or she just didn't feel like it was a good idea at the time because we were all in the courtroom. I was angry because I'm like, we've already gone through this ugly 2-year court battle. I guess she was maybe worried about how people were going to react if somebody might have got into it with somebody.
Courts sometimes don't allow evidence in at different times of a proceeding, and in this particular matter, it took a while before the judge let the DNA evidence in.
In fact, the court will end up taking a very long while to consider the DNA evidence. Left dangling by the uncertain conclusion of the hearing participants emerge into a strangely silent Dallas evening.
There was a stillness, a hush over the whole city, just like when Kennedy was killed. It was scary, it was eerie.
Finally, more than a year later, on October 9, 2002, Judge DeShazo issues a judgment declaring heirship.
It was kind of shocking.
The results put the matter beyond dispute. Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon really are the children of the legendary philosopher of soul.
I felt vindicated. I felt very proud. I was very proud of my mother. I don't think she knows that. But I was very proud of my mother because she was the one who pushed me to fight.
Yes, the result of the DNA testing was 99.9999% sure that TJ Hooker, Chiffon Taylor Brown, and Fonda Bryant are the children of Johnnie Taylor.
DNA does not lie.
And we won. Ain't that nice?
I felt so exalted when she was declared an heir.
People always ask me, how did my mom meet my father? because they think okay, he was famous, there was no way my mom could have met him in little old Gastonia.
And I am so happy she won. It wasn't really even about the money. It was for her to know for once and for all he was her dad.
It pulls at your heartstrings to think that a child would not know who his own father was or who her own father was.
Mother, I am very proud of you for pushing me to do what was right.
Sometimes the courts may make a wrong decision. Thankfully, in this particular case, our court made the right decision.
For the courts to give us 2 more sisters and another brother, I thought was very crummy. If my father didn't say they was his children, then why should the courts give them to us? I don't think that was right. I don't think that was right at all.
They did what they had to do. I would imagine if I saw one of them today that I would embrace them.
Judge DeShazo rules that Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon are legal heirs to Johnnie Taylor's estate. In the end, Johnnie Taylor's house, originally valued at $1.2 million, ends up in Jerlene's hands after she buys out the half owned by Taylor's children. They, in turn, split the proceeds between them after the legal and tax debts have been paid.
When we got finished, we got a check for like $2,000-something from the sale of the house and everything. That was it.
Unfortunately, the majority of the estate went to payment of creditors, including the IRS.
We did not receive a lot of money from the estate, and we were kind of bamboozled out of a whole lot of our inheritance, to be honest with you. But you cannot miss what you never had. And the only thing I wanted was my mama's honor. And
All I really cared about was the Johnnie Taylor name living on and on.
It's time for us to come together, put all the hatred to side, and be a family and celebrate this man, his music, and his legacy the way it should be as a family.
It was a wonderful opportunity that we let fall by the wayside to get to know one another.
Love is the answer for all the world's trouble, yeah. Love is the answer for you and me. How we treat our families can be so mean. But just you remember when you had lost your way. Love was the answer. That's why you're here today. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.